Hello, 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 and welcome to the increasingly inaccurately named May Livestream Q&A today on Sunday, June 5th. Well, we couldn't really do it in May. Lots of holidays towards the end of May, and last weekend really wasn't going to work at all. So we're doing it in June, but that's okay. Now, I know you've been waiting to ask all of your questions, so if you haven't had the opportunity yet, head over to slido.com, and enter the code MAYQA2022 to be connected to this particular Slido Q&A and ask your questions. We already have 25 or so questions, some of which have 40, 50, 60 votes. And so you might have a better chance finding a question that's close to yours and voting that one up instead of asking the same thing twice and essentially splitting the votes. But we'll get started soon enough. All right, let me just check in. Let's see. Let's check in the chat and see. All right. The sound is clipping. Oh. All right. I see the sound is clipping. I don't know why the sound is clipping. You're going to have to give me a second, everyone. Apologies. I'm going to be right back because I'm alone in the studio, so I'm going to have to fix it myself. All right, let's see. Now, the sound should not be clipping, but I was getting a notification that the sound was clipping by one of my moderators, so let me know if it's any better now. Sound was almost okay. What is the Slido code? Someone asks. It's MAYQA2022. It's stuttering a little. All right, I don't know what's going on. I don't know why it's going on. I don't know if it's maybe the fan is making it cut off. So let's, oh, I see. I'm dropping packets. Okay, I now see that I am dropping packets at some point. I'm not quite sure why. Shall I try and troubleshoot it or should I keep going? All right, give me just a second. I'm going to try and troubleshoot it. Nope, just keep going. Go, 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 go. Okay, I'm just going to keep going. First question of the day. Can you explain the differences between HDLCs and PTLCs? Now we have Taproot and Schnorr signatures. When will we have dual funded channels? Kicking off with quite a technical question right off the bat. So Dual funded channels, HDLCs, PTLCs, taproot, Schnorr signatures. Let me explain some of these terms. Okay, all of this is related to the Lightning Network. The Lightning Network being a layer 2 technology that runs on top of Bitcoin and allows you to make fast, secure, and cheap payments by taking those payments off chain in a manner that you don't have to trust anyone. I wrote about it in this book, Mastering the Lightning Network, which is the latest book that I published with my two co-authors, Lalo Stocken and Rene Picard. So, HDLCs are a technology that is currently used in Lightning. It's how the payment channel protocol works in Lightning. And an HDLC is the thing that is forwarded across a payment channel from hop to hop in the Lightning Network. So HDLC stand for Hash Time Lock Contract. Now, PTLCs are another type of payment channel protocol called Point Time Lock Contract, where instead of using hashes to unlock a payment, you use points on the elliptic curve. And point time locked contracts are possible now because of Schnorr signatures, which is a new type of digital signature algorithm that was introduced in November. Taproot and Schnorr were introduced together in a package of updates of the Bitcoin protocol called the Taproot soft fork that was activated in November. And finally, Frankie asks, when will dual funded channels be available? So a clarification here. Dual funded channels do not depend on any of these technologies. HDLCs, PTLCs, Taproot, Schnorr. You can do dual funded channels given the existing HDLC-based payment channels. In fact, we could do it with any payment channel protocol, HDLCs or PTLCs, so we didn't need Taproot or Schnorr. Dual funded channels simply mean that when the channel is funded, the funding output is created by both parties, both peers, putting money into the channel. And the reason we don't have dual funded channels is because they require a more complex setup. Rather than one party creating the transaction to fund the channel and the other party simply agreeing to that transaction, for a dual funded channel, you have to effectively create the transaction together, which means that both of the channel partners need to be online at the same time and they need to do a negotiation back and forth. In fact, the way they would create this funding transaction is very similar to how you would do a coin join. You essentially sign one input each and put it together in a single transaction that creates an output funded by both parties. And that is possible with the existing protocols. It just takes someone to write a protocol in order to do that. And in fact, one of the developers from the Sea Lightning project, and I'm not entirely sure who it was, recently proposed and wrote out a detailed proposal for implementing dual funded channels. So dual funded channels, we can do them today if someone writes a common standardized protocol that allows different Lightning Network clients to create channels together and create dual funded channels. We probably will see PTLCs implemented on the Lightning Network within the next 6 months or so. There are a number of proposals as to how that would be done, including proposals that would allow channels to be upgraded in place, meaning that you don't need to close and reopen all of the channels that currently exist in order to transition them from hash time lock contract protocol to point time locked contract. All right, let's see what else do we have here. Ah, I see. For some reason, my slide isn't switching. We're having some technical problems today. Fun times, people. Let me see if I can fix that. Testing. 1, 1. Oh, this is fun. Oh, no wonder I couldn't solve the software microphone problems. They're not software problems. Okay, I've just discovered that the microphone cable is wonky, and when I move, it causes some problems. So I guess I'm going to have to be very, very still. I just discovered that the actual physical cable on my microphone is damaged. And so I'm going to have to replace this microphone, throw it away, and get a new one. I apologize for that. This is the lapel microphone I'm wearing, and apparently the cable's broken, so every time I move, I have a problem. Let's see. How's that? Are we still on? Hopefully that also accounted for the issues with the crackling sound you were getting, and maybe we no longer have issues with a crackling sound. Let's see. Our next question comes from Anonymous. Security in Bitcoin is due to the proof of work. If a miner commits fraud, he pays for it by wasting the electrical energy he has consumed. That energy is already lost by the miner when he fails to be the one who writes the block. I don't understand this. All right, let me see if I can explain that relatively quickly and give you an answer to help you understand this. In a block at the moment, when a block is created, there is a reward of 6.25 Bitcoin, 6.25 Bitcoin, which in today's money is still worth quite a lot of money, almost $200,000. What is it, $187,000? And so that's in every block, every 10 minutes, some miner has the opportunity to earn almost $200,000 worth of Bitcoin, 6.25, and that's not counting fees. If you add up the fees, it's usually quite a bit more. There's probably more than 200,000 once you add up all of the fees. If a miner is able to successfully mine a block and find the proof of work proof for that specific block and then tells the network and is the first to tell the network and therefore wins the competition, if you like, that miner can then, 100 blocks later, collect that 6.25 Bitcoin, and usually what the miner will do is exchange all or some of that Bitcoin into their local currency to pay their electricity bills, and the rest becomes profit. So, if you use the electricity and win, you get $200,000 with which to pay for the electricity that you used. And because of the supply and demand of mining and the dynamic difficulty calculation, mining is barely profitable for some miners, meaning that if you put the hash power required to mine a block, to mine the entire block, to get the proof of work for an entire block, at today's mining difficulty, you're going to spend a lot of money on electricity, probably $100,000 on electricity, just during those 10 minutes that you're trying to mine that specific block. You may spend up to $100,000 on electricity. And then you win 200,000. So if you win the block, great. You won 200,000. You spent 100,000 of that on electricity, and now you have $100,000 profit. If, on the other hand, you either fail to mine the block because you don't have enough hash power, or worse, you make a mistake. You validate a block that has an invalid transaction in it. You don't do the job of a miner, which is to do security, and you effectively mine an invalid block, then you do not earn that reward. You do not earn the $200,000 in that block, because even though you will publish that block, everybody else will reject it and it won't get recorded in the blockchain. So if you don't do the security, you don't get to record the block in the blockchain because everybody else will reject it, and therefore you don't get to earn the reward. But you've already spent, say, $100,000 worth of electricity during those 10 minutes. So now you're in a $100,000 hole. You've made a $100,000 loss. So that's how the security works. It's a game of reward and punishment. The punishment is that you spend the money almost like a fidelity bond. You put the money up front to say, trust me, I'm going to do the security correctly, because if I don't, then I'm going to lose this money. All right, let me quickly check in the chat, since we've gone back and forth on this, and see how things are going and whether we are getting the sound correctly. And I'm going to find the next question to pull up for us. Oh, we've got another lightning question. That should be fun. Let's see in the chat, is the sound okay? All right, very good. Let's go to the next question. Next question comes from Anonymous, and it's again about the Lightning Network. Could you explain how revocation keys work and how a cheater can be punished by the cheated party? It's not supposed to be that the cheated party also has the revocation keys and would be able to claim all funds. All right, so in the Lightning Network, there is a mechanism that prevents cheating in the channel. And the way this works is, when you have a payment channel, you're moving the state of the payment channel further forward by signing and revoking commitment transactions. You sign the next commitment transaction, and then you revoke the previous commitment transaction. Let's look at an example. Let's say Alice and Bob have a channel, and that channel has 1 Bitcoin on Alice's side and 0 Bitcoin on Bob's side. Now Alice sends half a Bitcoin to Bob. Now the channel has half a Bitcoin on Alice's side, half a Bitcoin on Bob's side. How is that actually determined? Well, Alice and Bob will sign commitment transactions where they commit to the new balance of half a Bitcoin and half a Bitcoin, reflecting the update to the channel. So obviously this is in Bob's favor, because Bob now has half a Bitcoin on their side of the channel and their balance that they didn't have before. but this new commitment is not in Alice's favor. Okay, maybe she reluctantly signs that commitment transaction, but Alice still has a commitment transaction from the previous state of the channel where the balance was 1 Bitcoin to Alice, 0 to Bob. What prevents Alice from broadcasting that previous commitment, effectively going back to a previous state where Alice had a greater balance? What prevents it is that, first of all, there are two commitment transactions, one that Alice holds and one that Bob holds, and those commitment transactions are not the same. They're actually asymmetric. The transaction that Alice holds pays Bob immediately, but delays Alice's payment. So let's say the commitment transaction that reflects half a Bitcoin, half a Bitcoin. The commitment transaction Alice holds for that new state pays Bob's half a Bitcoin immediately, makes it available immediately, whereas Alice's half a Bitcoin is actually delayed by an HDLC delay. It's a time lock. So if Alice broadcasts that commitment transaction, Bob can immediately claim the half Bitcoin output that is due to Bob. Alice cannot claim the half Bitcoin output that is created by this commitment transaction that is due to her, because it's got a time lock on it that will prevent it from being claimed for, let's say, 48 hours. Now, there's something else that happens in here. Alice's commitment transaction also has a revocation clause. That means that if Alice has given Bob part of a special revocation key, meaning that Alice revoked this specific commitment transaction, Bob can retaliate if Alice broadcasts this transaction by taking the entire balance, the entire 1 Bitcoin balance of the entire channel. And that prevents Alice from broadcasting an old state. Alice will have the current commitment transaction for the current state, half a Bitcoin, and Alice may have dozens more commitment transactions from the past, but all of those past commitment transactions are revoked, and the reason they're revoked is because the revocation clause can be exercised by Bob on all of those previous transactions, because Alice has given Bob part of the revocation key that allows Bob to revoke them. Essentially, Alice signs the new commitment to allocate the channel 50-50 between her and Bob, and burns all of the previous transactions by giving Bob the penalty keys so that Bob can penalize her. So there is no one revocation key. In fact, there is a revocation key for Alice's transaction, there's a revocation key for Bob's transaction, and these are asymmetric again, meaning that the one that Bob holds allows Alice to collect the penalty, and the one that Alice holds allows Bob to collect the penalty. So, with that being said, if Alice publishes an older commitment and tries to cheat, she cannot claim the revocation penalty because she does not have the necessary key, but Bob does, and Bob can claim that, and vice versa. All right, I hope that answered the lightning question. Let's see what else we have. All right, can you still hear me? Is everything working with the sound? I hope so. Woo, let's move on. The next question comes from Anderson. Anderson asked, what are your thoughts on Terra issuing assets on the Bitcoin network? Why do we need it? Do you feel it deviates from the fundamental idea of Bitcoin trying to be money? For those who don't know, Terra is a protocol proposal that allows the Lightning Network to do some very basic types of tokens and NFTs that can be issued on top of Lightning, on top of Bitcoin. So it allows you to issue tokens and NFTs on top of the Lightning Network and then exchange them and pay them on the Lightning Network. So this is a proposal by Lightning Labs that make the LND Lightning Network daemon. I haven't studied Taro that much yet. I understand the broad parameters of what it's trying to do. Why we need it? I think the argument is that we need it so that we can do tokens and NFTs on Bitcoin and not have to rely on a separate blockchain to do that. And that's the argument, at least. Does it deviate from the fundamental idea of Bitcoin trying to be money? Not really. I don't think it does, because the ability to issue tokens that run on top of a money network, I think, is absolutely a valid application of that protocol. But I don't know whether that can be successful. I think that Ethereum is more successful at doing the tokens and NFTs game, and has been designed specifically to allow you to do those kinds of things with smart contracts. And as a result, Ethereum has a very early advantage with developers, and it appeals very much to developers who want to do things like that. It has an extensive tool set built around it, platforms, building blocks, etc., all of which are interoperable and do a lot more than just tokens and NFTs, and allow you to do a lot more on top of just tokens and NFTs. Honestly, I don't think Bitcoin can compete with Ethereum on Ethereum's use case, any more than I think that Ethereum can compete with Bitcoin on Bitcoin's use case. So I don't know how successful Taro can be. We've had colored coins, the ability to issue tokens, and even non-fungible tokens on Bitcoin since the early days. Protocols such as Omni, Counterparty, etc. In fact, Vitalik Buterin tried to build the first implementation of a smart contracts language on top of Omni, then called Mastercoin, which was a protocol for Bitcoin. When he discovered that it was not flexible enough, he built Ethereum instead. And so I don't think we're going to be revisiting that question, but I could be wrong. I'm going to just jump in the chat here and see how things are going. Let's see. Oh my. Okay, I see somebody is trying to brigade the chat with the same question again and again and again. And since I'm not answering questions from the chat, but I'm answering questions from the Slido so that we can give everybody an opportunity to vote, and we answer the questions that the most people are interested in asking, your attempt to brigade the chat not only fails to get me to answer the question and annoys everybody else, but it also activates the fearless moderators who will stomp on your ass, and you will find yourself in a timeout, like the toddler that you are, for 5 minutes. And if that's not enough, you will be shown the door and kicked out of the chat room. So try them. Go ahead. Make Jessica's day. She's been waiting all day for this. All right, let's see what else we've got. Oh, here's a fun one. Could you explain the whys and hows of the Terra Luna apocalypse for a virgin noob coiner to have a decent grasp of what's going on? Once upon a time, there was an algorithmic stablecoin that used a crappy smart contracts blockchain and a very, very loose relationship between a US dollar pegged stablecoin called USDT UST and a token called Luna, such that issuing one burned the other, and burning one issued the other, and vice versa, so that you could basically have a supply and demand. This was loosely coupled with an organization that hoarded a whole bunch of Bitcoin and then was hoping through manual trading to use that Bitcoin reserve funds to stabilize the peg of their semi-algorithmic stablecoin. And that was the how. And then what happened is that, as is often the case in Bitcoin, people get FOMO and go chasing after opportunities and gains. And this happens across the token industry. So rather than the usual response from Bitcoiners, which would be, this is yet another shitcoin, of course, as is always the case for anything that isn't Bitcoin. Instead, what you got was many mainstream people in Bitcoin praising Terra Luna's stablecoin because the reserve fund that they were building involved buying tens of thousands of Bitcoin on the open market and driving up the price. So when you have in one hand your ethics, principles, and ideological positions, and in the other hand, the possibility of making money on Bitcoin, what happened to my ethics and my principles? Ooh, I dropped them. So while I'm looking at the price over here, I'm going to pay the price in the long run if I throw away my principles and go cheering for the latest billionaire scumbag that has adopted, endorsed, filled their treasury with Bitcoin, and is considered a hero because they're using Bitcoin for some or other reason, and this is popping and driving up the price. So predictably, the peg didn't last because this was a fairly new thing. I mean, the whole thing had been around for just over a year. It has shot up in price very rapidly. It had not been tested under difficult conditions. It had only ever existed in a bull market. And it appears that someone with very deep pockets, in the order of about $3 billion, did a leveraged short sell trade where they fooled one of the founders into giving them discounted Luna, and then short sold, creating a short squeeze on the peg, broke the peg, which then caused a long squeeze on Luna, and broke Luna, which then broke the peg even further, which then broke Luna, which broke the peg even further, and it all came crashing down. So that's what happens. You know, there have been quite a few stablecoins over the past 6 or 7 years, starting, of course, with Tether, which is not an algorithmic stablecoin, but instead an asset-backed stablecoin that has dollar reserves in bank accounts and other assets, which has all kinds of third-party rehypothecation and counterparty risk issues, but, you know, it's existed. It's been relatively stable, as well as various private stablecoins like the one issued by Coinbase, the one issued by Gemini, etc., etc. And there have also been some algorithmic stablecoins, the most notable, of course, being the MakerDAO DAI coin, which is an Ethereum-based dollar token, and is based on a smart contract and algorithmically traded. It has some difficulties from time to time, but never has it had this kind of collapse, even when the market really gave it some big upsets a couple years back when the price of Ether tumbled very rapidly. And that put a strain on the dollar peg, but it held. And it held because it's a well enough designed system. And it's now been tested for, I think, maybe 5 years, and it's survived several up and down cycles. So just because one stablecoin fails doesn't mean all stablecoins are garbage. But this one was garbage. And now we have a second iteration of it, I think Luna 2.0, which presumably is equally as garbage as the first one, given that it's made by the same people. All right. So that's what happened with Terra Luna. Now, maybe the side question you might be asking, is that the end of Bitcoin? Is that the end of crypto? Is that the end of the end? No. I mean, it hurt and it wiped off several $billion worth of value, but we were already going into a bear market. We were already going back into crypto winter. And if you've been around, well, as long as I've been around in this industry, you know that there is a seasonality to it. Every 3.5 to 4 years, we have a big boom followed by an equally big, almost equally big bust. And what's interesting about these seasonality cycles is that so far, at least, the busts have been less bad than the booms have been good, meaning that the overall trend is positive. You know, this time we were saying Bitcoin collapsed to 28,000. Last time that was above the all-time high. Before that, we said it collapsed to 16. Before that, we said it collapsed to 6,000. Before that, we said it collapsed to 300. It's been collapsing for a long time. All right, are we still having some problems with the audio? I will replace this microphone cord by the next live stream, but unfortunately, I can't really do anything to fix it right at this moment. I'm trying to stay still and not move too much. All right, how are we doing so far? Are we enjoying this live stream? A couple of weeks ago, I visited Berlin to see a friend. You may have seen it on Twitter. I was spotted at a local meetup, and this is one of the souvenirs I got. Yes, because if you're going to drink beer, get yourself a mug the size of your head, because that's the way we do it. All right. So, I mentioned that I'll have the audio fixed by next live stream, but I actually have some more important news about the next live stream, and this may come as a shock to some of you. Now, you probably have been around long enough to remember when I started doing these live streams before the pandemic. And we used to do them for the Patreon supporters, the community builders on Patreon only. And then during the pandemic, we opened it up and turned it into a live YouTube stream that was available to everyone who got to ask questions live during the recording and the performance of this live stream. Whereas before, what we would do is do the live stream privately and then publish some excerpts from the live stream at a later time. Well, So, as of the next live stream, which will be at the beginning of July, we're changing the live streams. And we are going to a new format, which will be closed and available only for participants who are supporters on Patreon. So what does that mean for all of those of you who are interested in what we're doing? It means that we're going to have a much more intimate, much more direct, much more small-scale interaction. The Patreon Q&A will be interactive. And what that means is that you'll be able to join. We're going to be using a different platform. It's not going to be live streamed on YouTube, but instead, it's going to be on Zoom. Or a similar conferencing platform. We're not going to stream it live to YouTube. Instead, you will be able to join, and if all goes well, you will be able, if you want, to turn on your camera, show your name, and speak. And we can have a more intimate, more direct conversation. And that's how the Q&A will be happening from now on. Now, for those who are members of the YouTube channel and subscribers to the YouTube channel, you will still get early access to new video releases, community updates, excerpts from the live stream that will be edited and provided to YouTube members. Unfortunately, no, there will not be any more emojis in the chat because we won't have a live chat on YouTube. So, if you want to be part of the next live stream, then consider joining as a community builder on Patreon, and you can do so by going to this link, https patreon.com/aantonop. Find me on Patreon, consider supporting my work on Patreon, and this is going to be one of the main perks and advantages of participating as a community builder on Patreon. You will be able to participate in the live Q&A live, and you will hear and see me talk about things that I won't necessarily be sharing with the world. We're not going to dump a recording of the entire conversation. If we do record, we're going to record just my side of the conversation, so just me. It's going to be much more informal, maybe not as fancy a studio. I might have a smaller beer mug. Maybe I won't have a bonsai tree. It's going to be more simple, more direct, more informal. But I'm actually looking forward to it because what it will allow me to do is have a real conversation with all of the people who have supported me for all this time, and we'll figure it out as we go. All right, let's see what other Q&A we have to answer today. Give me 1 second. But okay, I did mention that emojis are going away. Unfortunately, we won't have a chat room in which we can do custom emojis. And that means that if we do an emoji storm today, it will be our final emoji storm on this channel. So, now's your chance. If you have been a YouTube member and you have access to the custom emoji, now's your chance to show it by doing a custom emoji storm on this channel. All right, give me 1 second because my iPad went to sleep and all right. Our next question, again, another lightning question from AMB. Um, should private channels be the default? For better privacy, would you recommend reopening all channels as private? Do private channels make it harder for chain analysis? Um, Not really. Private channels are actually a misnomer, and um, it's something we clarify in this book. We don't call them private channels on purpose. We specifically say that instead they should be called unannounced channels. They're unannounced because the transaction that funds them is on the blockchain, and if you close the channel, a transaction that looks very much like a Lightning Network closing transaction will appear on the Bitcoin blockchain, and it will be very obvious that that was a Lightning channel, and you'll be able to see the channel ID in there because it's the transaction ID of the funding channel, of the funding transaction. So private channels aren't private. They're simply channels that are not announced as part of the gossip protocol in the Lightning Network. Now, you can create an entire network based on private channels where they're not announced to anyone. And if you make a payment, the invoice will contain routing hints, as they're called, which basically give you markers, waypoints in your route. They say, okay, to send me a payment, you need to send it to these intermediary nodes that know how to reach me. And so that way you tell the other node how to route payments to you because they won't know about the channels because those channels have not been announced. So only the sender of a transaction gets to find out about those channels during their operation. However, when you close the channel, you still record something on the blockchain. For real privacy in the Lightning Network, the technologies that will give us better privacy in the Lightning Network are actually part of the Taproot package that was activated in November. So Taproot can be used to give us privacy in a number of different ways. First of all, the Schnorr signatures allow us to change the protocol for payment channels from HDLCs to PTLCs. Maybe you remember that was the first question I answered today. And HDLCs unfortunately leak information by keeping track of the hash that is used in a payment. Someone who has several nodes in the route can correlate payments that are being routed to a specific to each other through this hash. Point time lock contracts don't have the ability to be correlated because each hop in the payment path uses a different point, and that's a big increase in privacy. So Schnorr signatures give us PTLCs. PTLCs allow us to have payments that are not easily correlated with each other because you can't correlate them based on the payment hash. That's part one. Part two, when you close and do a collaborative close of a Lightning channel where both of the channel partners, the two peers that have the channel, collaborate to close the channel, they can use a Taproot signature. What that means is instead of having a transaction that creates two outputs where the input is a multisig, which is obviously a Lightning channel, instead it will be a single Schnorr signature that will be cooperatively created by the two participants, which will make it look as if the original funding transaction wasn't a Lightning channel at all. It was a single payment to some key holder who is now sending a payment to two different parties. You can't tell it's a channel anymore. So you can't correlate activity on the chain with activity in the Lightning Network because the transactions for opening and closing a channel now look like simple payments, and they no longer look as very obvious 2 of 2 multi-sig transactions that are Lightning channel open and closes. So you can learn more about that in this book, and Keep in mind, like my other mastering books, this is an open book. I noticed someone was asking in the chat earlier how they could get a copy of the book because they can't afford it or they can't pay me to buy it from my shop. First of all, this isn't available on my shop anyway, because I only sell the open edition of my books. But you can literally go to GitHub and search for LN book, Lightning Network book, LN book, and you can read what's exactly behind me on paper, exactly every single word as is. You can read it on GitHub for free, and you can share it. It's available under a non-commercial Creative Commons license, so everybody can read any of the mastering series books that I've written, Mastering Bitcoin, Mastering Ethereum, or Mastering the Lightning Network for free. You do not have to pay for it. Again, I'm very, very sorry for the audio problems we're having. I wish I could fix it. I wish I could find a way to prevent these audio problems, but unfortunately, I can't fix it right now. All right, let's go back to and answer the next question. Anonymous asks, I would love to know your thoughts on the upcoming Ethereum upgrade and its move to proof of stake. After more than 3 years of delays, it is possible that in August, Ethereum will finally move to proof of stake. This is the ETH2 upgrade. It involves a beacon chain that coordinates through a proof of stake protocol instead of the current proof of work protocol that's used in ETH1. ETH2 uses a beacon chain that coordinates through proof of stake, meaning that people commit Ether as collateral in order to do the security of the chain. And if they find the correct answer together with everybody else, they get a small reward from the fees and new Ether that is issued, proportionate to the stake that they've put down. And if they make a mistake, they can get slashed, meaning they can lose part of their stake because they essentially agreed on an incorrect block. Now, what's going to happen during this transition is that the old ETH1 chain is going to get swallowed as a whole and is going to get migrated into ETH2, the whole thing, with all of the existing smart contracts, all of the existing applications, all of the existing state, effectively, the balances, the keys, the public addresses, all of that is going to exist in ETH2. Effectively, ETH1 is going to run as one of the shards, from what I understand, in ETH2. There will be more room for more scale and more things to be added later, but by swallowing all of ETH1, ETH1 will effectively become a proof-of-stake system. It will no longer be mined with proof of work. There will be no mining. There will be no energy-intensive hashing on the Ethereum network. Instead, it will be based on staking Ether, something that has already been going on for the past, I think it's almost 2 years now. People have been staking Ether and participating in the proof of stake algorithm of the beacon chain as an experiment, but now it's going to become a live network in August, and it's going to provide the security for the entirety of the Ethereum system. Now, what does this mean to you as a user? Hopefully nothing, and this is the goal. Nothing should change from your perspective. Your ability to do transactions, your keys, your funds, everything migrates exactly as is. You do not need to change anything on your end. All of the funds that you currently have in ETH1 will exist at the same addresses, accessible with the same keys and the same digital signatures using perhaps the same devices that you have now, hardware wallets, etc., will exist on ETH2. All of the smart contracts that you are running or participating in or accessing will also exist in ETH2 exactly as they do in ETH1 today. So as a user, you don't do anything. It should be a completely seamless migration. Fingers crossed, of course. Something at this scale has never been done before. There's never been a migration of this scale with from proof of work to proof of stake before, but this is something that the entire Ethereum development community has been preparing for more than 5 years. Almost from the beginning, Ethereum was heading in this direction. It was known from design time that Ethereum was going to be a proof of stake network. The proof of work was temporary. That temporary ended up being 7 years long, but it's now coming to a close, hopefully, in August of this year. All right. Aww. People are adding hearts in the chat. Oh, thank you. I know the audio has been very difficult today, and I'm very sorry for that, but thank you for your support regardless. Hopefully you're learning something between the interruptions, and I'm trying to be as still as possible to avoid jiggling this wire, and I promise you I will have a new microphone next time. All right. And let's see, I think this might be the last question for today. It's a good question and one that we have talked about before. All right. So this question comes from Eric. Eric asks, a friend had a seed phrase from a 2015 Bitcoin wallet, the software of which was abandoned. We tried to recreate this account using a Ledger hardware wallet. No Bitcoin was visible. Then tried recreating it on a Coinbase wallet. Bingo. How is this possible? So this is a great question, Eric, and something that a lot of users have run into this particular problem, and it's a problem that can confound users. So let's start with the most important part of this answer. If you have a 12 to 24 word mnemonic phrase that you have used on any wallet, and this 12 to 24 word mnemonic phrase is created based on the same BIP39, BIP32 standards, and that is 99.9999% certain, then you can recover the funds that you had on that mnemonic phrase, on that 12 English word or 24 English word phrase. You can recover it on a wallet of a different manufacturer or software vendor or software developer, meaning that you can take that 12-word seed phrase and you can recover it on any compatible wallet that allows you to do a recovery in a custom way. Let me explain why. This is a tree. In this case, it's a little bonsai tree, Microcarpa ginseng ficus. Now, trees are useful in describing this particular issue because when we are using a 12 to 24 word mnemonic phrase, that is called a seed phrase. And the reason it's often colloquially called seed phrase is because what you build with that is known as a hierarchical deterministic wallet. Hierarchical deterministic wallet, or HD wallet. And a better way of describing an HD wallet is a tree of keys. So, the visual you should remember is the 12 to 24 English words are a seed. When you plant that seed, it grows a tree of keys. Plant the seed, grow a tree of keys, right? So this tree, as you can see, has different branches on it. And these branches are described by a notation called a derivation path. You may have already seen such a thing. For example, you may see the notation M/44/0/0. What does that mean? M stands for the master key, which is the root of this tree. And then 44 indicates on the first level of branching, right above the trunk, you go to the 44th branch and you look at keys underneath that 44th branch. On the second level of branching, meaning branches below the 44th branch, so follow the 44th branch up and then look on the next branching point, you follow the 0th branch. We count from 0. That effectively means simply the first branch from that branching point. And then /0 again. On the third branching point, you follow again the 0 branch. So 44, 0, 0. And that way you follow from the trunk up through the branches until you arrive at one of these leaves. Each one of these leaves is a key, and that can generate an address and can sign transactions. So the tree has keys on the leaves of the tree, right? Now, how do you know where your keys are? Well, you need to know which branch to look at. Here's the thing. This is a weird tree. And the reason it's a weird tree is because the number of branches at each branching point is denoted by a 32-bit number. That means a number that has 32 binary digits. 32 binary digits gives you 4 billion possible branches at each branching point. Now, we only use half of those because of a thing called hardened derivation. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. The point is 2 billion of those branches, the hardened branches, are the ones we use for generating keys. So at each branching point, you have the possibility of choosing one of 2 billion branching points. So we start at the root. Immediately above, the tree branches into 2 billion branches. You have to find the correct one of those 2 billion branches. Then it branches again with 2 billion branches on each one, meaning that on the second level of the tree, 2 billion times 2 billion. Yeah, it's a lot of branches. And then on the third branching point, it branches again into 2 billion branching points, and so on and so forth. There's no limit to how many branching points you can go, and you keep multiplying by 2 billion at each point. Now, your keys are there. They're down one of these paths. But how the hell do you find the correct path if you don't know? Well, I don't know. We could just check all of them. Well, if you try to check all of them, what you're ending up doing is you're creating what's known as a combinatorial explosion, meaning that knowing that the keys are probably 3 branching points down, you actually have to look at 2 billion to the third power number of possible leaves to see if it has money on it, if that key corresponds to an address which corresponds on the blockchain to funds stored for your wallet. So how do wallets deal with this? Well, we use certain standardized derivation paths. M4400, for example, is the standard for SegWit Bitcoin keys. Now, for good reason, we can actually use this so that we have different cryptocurrencies on different branches. So, for example, Bitcoin SegWit keys that start with, let's say, 44 is not SegWit. 44, I don't remember. I'm not going to try and remember off the top of my head. If I remember correctly, actually, SegWit native keys are on branch 84. Ethereum keys are on branch 60. Monero keys might be on a different branch. And then how many branching points beyond that initial number you go may determine other things. All of this is defined in a standard called BIP43, which tells you how to navigate the branches in order to find the correct place. Many wallets do not implement this in a standard way. So, if the software you created the wallet in went down one of these branches and started generating keys on the leaves of that branch, and then you take the same seed and you move it to another wallet, let's say, as your friend did, the Ledger Hardware wallet, the Ledger Hardware wallet is going to grow the same tree, but it's not actually going to look at all of the branches. It's not going to generate all of the branches. It's going to go looking down the 44th branch if you tell it that these are SegWit keys, or native SegWit is going to look down the 84th branch. If you tell it it's Ethereum keys, it's going to look down the 60th branch. It's not going to look at any of the other 2 billion possible branches, and it's definitely not going to go searching to see if perhaps the previous time you used that particular seed, you used it with a non-standard derivation path. It's just going to go and assume that you were using a Ledger wallet before, so you were using the standard path that Ledger wallets use, and go looking there. Your keys are still there. Your money is still connected to those keys and recorded on the blockchain, but when the Ledger wallet looks at your balance, it's generating from a specific branch, it's looking at those addresses in the blockchain, and it's seeing no money. Why? Because it's looking down the wrong branch. You haven't lost your money, it's just on a different branch. So there's a couple of ways you can go about this. You can look back and find which branch was being used by the original software that created this wallet. And there's actually a really nice website called walletsrecovery.org. Wallets, plural, recovery.org. If I'm remembering that off the top of my head, because I'm not a search engine. And what that website does is it has a very, very good list of the derivation paths, the specific location on the branches that different wallets used historically for Bitcoin and possibly for other cryptocurrencies, but I think it's mostly Bitcoin. And then it will tell you so that you can go and find your keys. Now, many wallets, when you do the recovery, you can actually specify a custom path. Even with the Ledger wallet, for example, you could tell it, I want you to take this seed and recover it, but I don't want you to go down the standard Ledger derivation path of M4400. I want you to go looking on this other one. Maybe it's M000, and that's where you're going to find my money. And if you tell it to do that, the Ledger wallet is quite happy to use that path, go looking on those branches, and it would find your money. So the seed in itself is not enough for a painless recovery of funds unless you're recovering to the exact same wallet, or unless your wallet was using the standard path. If your wallet is using the standard path or you're recovering to the exact same wallet, no problem. The 12 words are enough. You will find your money. If it's not the same wallet, or if it wasn't using a standard path, you need to know this additional piece of information. It's not the end of the world. Honestly, there aren't that many combinations. Just because there's 2 billion possible branches available doesn't mean that wallets would just randomly go in picking paths. It's essentially a half dozen to 2 dozen different cases of where the money might be. And if you don't know, you can actually do a search. You can configure that. In fact, I sponsored the development of a plugin for the Electrum wallet that does exactly that. It goes and does a search on all of the commonly used paths to see if it can find balance on any of them, so that rather than you having to tell it where to go on the derivation path, it uses a search function to help you find where your money was hanging. All right, so that's a quick tutorial on derivation paths, the tree of keys, and why your friend Eric was unable to see the money with one wallet and able to see it with another that simply searched the same derivation path. Oh, and I even guessed the URL correctly. Woohoo! Good for memory there. All right, I hope you enjoyed that last. It was a technical answer, but also one that I know has plagued many new users who are trying to recover a long-lost wallet. Be very careful with this stuff, folks. The one thing you don't want to do is, in a rush or a panic, ask someone for help and give them access to your recovery words, your 12-word seed, because they're going to steal your money, with few exceptions. There are a couple of reputable recovery firms that I've worked with in the past, but you know, honestly, your chance of finding them with a Google search among all of the scam sites that look almost identical are pretty slim. The good news is you're in no hurry. Urgency, in fact, is your enemy. Scammers rely on you having a sense of urgency and taking hasty steps. But the simple truth is, if your money is on this 12-word seed, it's on this 12-word seed. If it hasn't been compromised, if it hasn't been stolen, it's sitting there. It's not going to rot. It's not going to spoil. It's going to continue to sit there. Especially in Bitcoin, there are no changes that are made to the protocol that break backwards compatibility for access to funds. That's a fundamental principle in design and development of Bitcoin is we do not make changes that break people's access to funds. You're not supposed to have to get your keys, which you may have buried in the bottom of a cave, in order to do something urgently for an upcoming change in Bitcoin. You can still spend money that's in, you know, theoretically, Satoshi could come along and spend money from block 1. And they would be able to do so because that key is still good. And it will continue to be good. So, remember this. There's never any urgency. If in doubt, take a deep breath, slow down. If your money hasn't been compromised, it's not going to get compromised unless you do something stupid in haste. You have all the time in the world to try to figure out where exactly your money has gone. And if it's already gone, if it's already compromised, it's already gone. Nothing you can do in haste will make it come back if it's gone, or prevent it from going away. It simply is fine. Wait a bit. And that's good advice for security, because a lot of scammers use urgency, fake urgency, in order to fool you into parting with your money. All right. And with that, that's our last answer for this live stream. And this is the last live stream that's going to be broadcast on YouTube. As I mentioned earlier in this broadcast, we are going to be switching to a more intimate, informal, closed group, which is going to be accessible to community builders on Patreon who will have access to the monthly live stream. Then we will take specific questions, the recording of just me and those specific questions, and we will be republishing them to YouTube as snippets, as excerpts, as educational video. A good example would be that whole thing I just did with the bonsai tree. That's exactly the kind of question that we would republish for others to watch and learn from. And we will make that available, and you'll be notified if you're a YouTube subscriber. However, you don't get to ask the questions or watch it live unless you are a community builder on Patreon. And with that, thank you so much for your patience today. And again, my sincere apologies for the audio problems, a hardware problem with a microphone that I could not fix during a live broadcast. We will take care of that before the next one. And thank you for your patience through these problems. All right. See you, everyone. Have a good time.
Hi, I'm Andreas Antonopoulos. If you enjoyed that video, consider that it takes a lot of work to produce open and free content that can be shared with everyone around the world. This isn't sponsored by some company, it's not promoting a product or an altcoin or some kind of investment scheme. My goal is simply to help explain the technology of Bitcoin and open blockchains to as many people as possible in a neutral way that focuses really on the incredible possibilities that this technology brings us. If you'd like to support that mission, subscribe to my channel and go on patreon.com/aantonop, where you can participate and help me build better content for more people. Thank you.